Welcome to the second session of inter-process communication. Last class, we had discussed about various terminologies that we will see while discussing inter-process communication. So, hope you remember, in our last class, we had discussed various terminologies by taking an example of an application, of a large application that is used for monitoring the temperature of a room. Based on the temperature of the room, either AC or fan will be switched on. So as that application, considering that application as a large application, we had divided that single application or the execution of that single application into multiple processes. Actually, the idea of dividing that single application into multiple processes is possible only due to new programming idea, which is termed as concurrent programming. So we are aware of normal programming in which we are having only one flow of control. But in the case of concurrent programming, unlike normal programming, concurrent programming is about programs with multiple flows of control. So for better understanding, we will again take the same example that we had discussed in our previous class. So here the application was divided into multiple processes, and that single application will be executed as multiple process. I'm naming it as P1, P2, and P3, where P1, that is the process P1, is aimed to measuring the temperature, and P2 aimed at switching on the AC based on the room temperature, and P3 switching on a fan based on the room temperature. So for the execution of P2 and P3 clearly requires the result of P1. And therefore we can say that P2 and P3 is depending on P1. While the execution of P2 and P3 doesn't require any dependency. So P2 and P3 is depending on P1. Means what? There should be some type of communication in between P1 with P2 and P3. Or in other words, these processes should somehow cooperate each other. Like human beings, see, in the case of human beings, we are communicating or we are cooperating each other by either by using a language to communicate, or by using any gesture, or by sending messages. So similarly, there should be some techniques by which the process can cooperate each other if it is a dependent process. Today, we will see how the process can communicate each other or cooperate each other. And this idea is termed as inter-process communication. Any methods with which an inter-process communication is possible should be supported by the operating system. For explaining, again I am assuming that there are two processes, P1 and P2, such that P1 and P2 have separate virtual addresses. See, as the term indicates, it is having a separate virtual address means that one process can't readily read a variable which is written by the other process. So we have to think about the way with which they communicate each other in the absence of such facility. One idea which easily come to our mind is using of files. You all may be familiar with the term file, and you must be knowing that it is an entity which exists on the hard disk of the computer. As long as a process can open a file with sufficient privileges to do so, if the particular process can communicate with the other process through these files. For explaining more about this file, we will take a scenario of communication between a parent process and child process. Don't get confused with this term parent and child. The term come into picture. Why? Because usually any program will be starting execution, even it is concurrent programming, it will be starting its execution as a single process. After some point of time, when it requires the necessity of the next process or next subprogram, if it was in the case of normal programming, the execution process will stop there and the pointer will move to the next location. But in the case of concurrent programming, there is no execution stop for the initial execution or the former execution. Here the next process or next subroutine will concurrently processing or will concurrently start processing, and hence the former one was termed as parent. That means it is the reason for forking of the next process. So the former one was called as parent and the later one is termed as child process. Suppose due to some reasons, these two processes need to communicate with each other, and we are assuming that the parent process need to communicate some value or a particular value to the other process or child process. For example, it is trying to transmit a data or value 6. So here the parent process will create two files. The parent process will create two files before forking of child process. Why two files? One file will be used by the parent process for writing some data. From that file, the child process will read the data which is written by the parent process. The second file will be used by the child process for writing some data from the child process, and the same will be read by the parent process. Once the parent create two files, the child inherits all the information about the two files like file descriptors, from parent and the file pointers. We will discuss more about file descriptors and file pointers later in this session. Once this inheritance is completed, file will be used by parent and child for read or write operation. Now this is the advantage, right? This is a one technique how which we are enable the inter-process communication. So the problem with this type of mechanism is that in this process of IPC or inter-process communication, it involves slower device parts like file, which is stored in hard disk. Any piece of communication between parent and child involves a write to hard disk and a read from hard disk, which consume several milliseconds, if not seconds. The next idea for inter-process communication is by the use of pipes. The mechanism of using pipe for intercommunication is same as that of file. Pipe provides two file descriptors so that instead of writing directly to the file in the hard disk, with the speciality of OS functionality, it bypasses the use of hard disk so that we can reduce the overheads of hard disk. Here, the parent will write the value to one of the file descriptor, while the other is used to writing by the child process. Now we can see how the file descriptors are declared. It is declared as int fd of 2 or fd of x, where x refers how many number of file descriptors needed. Here I am choosing for 2 file descriptors since we are taking the scenario of 2 process only. So that the 2 file descriptors will be fd of 0 and fd of 1. One for writing by process 1 or the parent process, and the other for writing by the child process. The nature of writing and reading is FIFO. It is first input and first output. The very important thing, as we had already discussed, that if you want to use pipe, then it should be supported by the operating system. Now the next idea is that process could communicate through variables that are shared between them. Initially, we had used a technique for using files, then pipe, which is similar to that of file. Now entirely different one by sharing a particular variable between the parent process and child process. Idea here is same. The idea here is that there is some variable that could be used to communicate between parent and child. Such variables are termed as shared variables, and other variables are termed as private variables. Now suppose we have an variable x that is to be shared between, that is used to share between P1 and P2. So if P1 want to write some data onto X, which is termed as X1, which can be read by P2. While P2, after its execution, the result can be stored in X2, which can also be read by P1. But the problem here is we have to create some variable exclusively which is to be shared between the two processes. There are some challenges in this method that we will discuss in later, virtual memory and shared variables. You will understand more about the technique that we had discussed just before while we are discussing this session. So virtual memory and shared variables. Address translation is used to protect one process from another, explicitly trying to make sure that variables of one process could not access variables of other process. Each process uses virtual address, or it requires a virtual address in the range of 0 to 2 raised to n minus 1. Now suppose P1 and P2 are using exclusively different virtual address of same range 0 to 2 raised to n minus 1. And in that range, there is some value, some variable that is shared between them. The shared variable of P1 is represented as blue color, while in P2 is represented as red in P2. So in P1, the shared variable or shared region is represented as blue color. For P2, it is red, as you can see. So this type of sharing of a particular variable between P1 and P2 is possible if and only if the operating system supports the shared variable function. Again, the sharing of variable X will be possible if and only if the page containing variable X in P1 and page containing X in P2 is mapped to same physical address with the range of 0 to 2 raised to m minus 1. So two conditions is necessary for this shared variable system. The first condition is it should be supported. Shared variable function should be supported by operating system, and the shared variable should be mapped to same physical address. All the other data, or there will be some other variables also which are required for both P1 and P2, which will be distinct to protect one process from the other. Then how can two processes share a variable? So this is something which can be done by explicit support of operating system. By default, the operating system virtual memory management system will protect the two processes from each other by declaring special shared memory through various kinds of system call mechanisms. Among the three techniques we had seen so far, as we understood, the third one involves less number of system calls to set up inter-process communication. Now let's see the other techniques for IPC mechanisms. Now we will take one example, the scenario of human communication. Like human communication, process could communicate by sending and receiving messages to each other. Again, the operating system should support these messages or messaging system. This is a new kind of facility which operating system should provide. If so, there will be system calls or library functions which calls for send and receive through which one process can package a piece of data within a message and send it to other process. Sometimes the process don't need to communicate explicit values to cooperate. So in order to cooperate, that need not communicate explicit values, it might do just less than that. All that required for the cooperation to be facilitated. So we will discuss one example that they might just have to synchronize their activities. So without explicitly transmitting data, by just synchronizing their activities, that it is possible that we can ensure communication between the process. The word synchronization, I will illustrate in this scenario on this interprocess communication with an example. So we are asked to write a program for multiplication of two matrices. So I'm here using the possibility of concurrent programming. I will achieve the solution for the above problem by creating a program that will run as three processes. So I'm taking three processes. The first process, P1, reads or is used to read two matrices. Now P2 will multiply the two matrices, and P3 will write the resultant matrix. Now let's assume that these matrices themselves are in a firm memory which is shared between processes. No need to think about the data in the matrix, whatever it is, whatever the matrix we are using. Our challenge is to ensure the cooperation between the process. As you know, see, P1 is used for reading, P2 is used for multiplying, and P3 for storing. Which should be the first process to happen? We have to ensure that P1 should read the two matrices initially. After that, P2 must multiply them. It is very, very important that P2 should not start before P1 completes this reading of two matrices. The same way, P3 should not start before P2 is completing its function. So this is a shared memory where matrices to be multiplied are variable. So two matrices M1 and M2. Now the worst condition, P1 had completed reading first matrix before completing reading of second matrix. What happened if P2 started at its stage? The result will be, as we know, it will be meaningless. Therefore, it is very important that P2 completes its function. P2 should not start until P1 is completed. Similarly, P3 should start only after P2 completes its function. This is a situation where we actually need synchronization between the process. That is, P2 should start function only after P1, and P3 should start only after P2 is completely done. Here the type of IPC P1, P2 and P3 are not sending explicit values to each other, but we are just ensuring that P2 should start only after P1 and P3 should start only after P2. So there is no need to transfer of values. The only important thing is that we should ensure perfect synchronization. But as we see, there is no advantage of concurrent programming here, right? That it is almost taking the same time as is the case when the task is completed as a single process. In practice, for synchronization, some kind of mechanism should be provided. That is typically provided by the operating system. And these are termed as synchronization primitives. Some names of synchronization primitives are mutex locks, semaphore, and barrier. We will see one by one later in the session, on the coming sessions. So these are the synchronization primitives. Now we will go back to our ITR 3, that is communication between with the help of, or inter-process communication with the help of shared variable. So programming with shared variables. Consider a two-process program in which both process is meant for increment a shared variable. There is one shared variable. There is one shared variable x. There is one shared variable x, and we are initializing the value of x as 0. The function of P1, as we had said just before, is to increment the value of x, and the function of the process 2 is again to increment the value of x. With the concept of concurrent program, but there is always a question, what will be the final answer? With the concept of so the question is, what will be the final answer with the concept of concurrent programming? Usually, while we're writing the program, the intention of such a program is to get the final answer as 2. That is, P1 will increment the value of x as 1 as the initial value of x is 0. Then P2 will again increment the value from 1 to 2. No problem, or the challenge is, there is a chance that value of x could be 1. Let's see how. P1 loads x into R1, increments R1. P2 loads the value of x, the initial value of x, that is 0, into its register before P1 stores the new value of x. The net result will be P1 and P2 will be 1 only. And this condition is termed as racing condition. As you can see, this challenge implies the necessity of synchronization of process. This racing condition or this problem will arise when two or more processes try to update a shared variable. Therefore, technically, we call that part of program where shared variable is accessed like this is termed as critical sections of the program, which is important part of the concurrent programming, which may have to be handled very, very carefully. Maybe using some kind of synchronization primitives like the one we had discussed for like mutex lock, semaphore, or barrier in order to make the program function as we intended. So in short, if you are programming using shared variables, then we have to treat the regions of program where we deals with shared variable, that is the critical section, very carefully. Now we will discuss what should be done in a critical section to ensure that the result of the concurrent program what we had actually intended for. It will be addressed here. Critical section problem, mutual exclusion. So critical section problem was a problem in critical section. The problem is that there is no perfect synchronization is taken while we are using shared variable system. So in general, in the case of critical section, handling the synchronization must be done in such a way that the process will access shared variable one at a time, which is technically termed as mutual exclusion. So mutual exclusion is in critical section, the shared variable should be allowed to access one at a time. Here first we will see mutex locks as the synchronization primitive. Mutex is the abbreviation for mutual exclusion, and lock represents a mechanism that ensures the problem will not arise. Mutex lock is a data structure provided by operating system, and its operations are controlled by operating system. The two operations of mutex lock are acquire lock and release lock. The general idea to use mutex lock is that before entering the critical section, we should acquire the lock call. Acquire lock call should be called, and release lock call after the execution of critical section, which ensures mutual exclusion. Now we will see how we can implement the lock. So acquire lock L, initially the lock L value will be 0. L0 implies that lock is available. When the value of L is 1, it implies that lock is not available. That means the critical section is engaged by some other process. When L is equal to 0, it implies that none of the processes engage or get into the critical section. So before, if some process, say for example P1 is going to enter a critical section, if you are using mutex lock primitive, once the P1 enters the critical section, it will set the value of L as 1. When or at the time by which the process P1 completes its execution with critical section area, the L value will be resetted as 0. That means the P1 has released the lock so that it can be acquired by any of the other process. Now, acquiring lock, while L equal to 1, that means we are in a waiting loop. That is, if P1 is acquired, as I had discussed just before, as I had explained just before, when L is equal to 1, when some of the process sees that the L value is 1, it means that what, some other process had acquired the critical section. So the other process should be or should put in a waiting loop. So waiting doesn't mean that this process is doing nothing. It is waiting for something to happen while continuously checking the value of L. When the value of L turns 0, it will acquire the critical section. After execution, the currently executing process will reset the value of L as 0, and therefore the other process can acquire the lock. Now we will see a scenario that may result in the failure of this mutex lock. That means there is a chance that we can't address the racing condition or critical section effectively with the use of synchronization primitive mutex lock. We will examine the scenario. So I will explain the scenario with the help of a timing line. Suppose there is two process P1 and P2. Assuming initially that the lock L is currently available, that is L is equal to 0. So that two process P1 and P2 can try to acquire the lock L. Now, as the initial condition is that L is 0, when P1 checks the value of L, it sees that what it will be seeing? It will see that the value of L is 0. For that, for checking that initially, the value of L will be, the P1 will load the value of L to its register R1. And it sees that initially the value of L is 0, which result in context switching. We have already explained the term context switching. Now, there is a possibility that there occurs some waiting time for waiting for something to happen. Suppose X time is completed. By completion of X time, we can see that the value of L is not yet changed. At that time, P2 needs to enter into that critical section. It will also load the value of L to R, its register. Then it will compare with 0. It sees that the value of L is 0. Now it will set the value of R1 and stores the value of R to L. Now P2 acquires the lock and enters into the critical section. So once this action is completed, the waiting period of P1 got completed, since it had already loaded the value of L to R, it will resume from that state. So now it will compare the value of R as in the scenario R is 0 already, as we had already loaded the value before P2 starts its operation, and it seems that it is 0. Now it will set the value of R as 1. Then it will store value of R to L, enters the critical section. This implementation, as you can see, this implementation allows two processes P1 and P2 to be in critical section together. Therefore, it doesn't, as you can see, it doesn't guarantee mutual exclusion. So implementation is, so this type of implementation includes a waiting loop, which itself is a critical section. So the use of mutex logs need a hardware support that we will discuss in our next class. Thank you.